act as a support medium for future youth development program, and it is very crucial under the context of K-economy. The Development Trust is a dedicated core in strengthening IKBN skills training program by providing modules that allows the youth to experience a continuous learning process. With the cooperation from the Department of Skills Development and Malaysian Accreditation Council, the Ministry of Youth and Sports is able to provide specialized skills training for all IKBN throughout Malaysia. At IKTBN Sepang, our students are exposed to theoretical and practical learning, in which exercises are carried out using the latest equipment used in the related industries. Hence, would help them in adapting the real working environment after completing their training. Several of job opportunities are offered to the students of IKTBN Sepang, which they could path their career onwards. The designation would be as Electronic Assistant Engineer, Industrial Hardware Manufacturer Designer, Press Tool Designer, Mechanical Manufacturing Machines Executives, and High Voltage Touchman. Apart from full-time courses, IKTBN Sepang do offers various part-time courses to industry workers and the public who intends to improve their skills. With a conducive and well-equipped learning facilities, IKTBN Sepang has implemented a variety of curriculum activities that help to create the students' learning style and optimize their performance. In addition to the conducive training facilities, IKTBN Sepang also provides various other facilities such as accommodation, dining hall, Muslim prayer hall, and leisure center to ensure maximum comfort for the students. IKTBN Sepang always ensures its skills training is in line with the latest industrial needs by having smart partnerships and memorandum of understandings with various industries. These agreements are aiming towards equipping the students with the latest technology as well as to ensure their marketability to the industries upon completing the training at IKTBN Sepang. Driving the students towards innovation, generating idea, and creative thinking were part of essential aspects in IKTBN Sepang, with proper conduct of guidelines to enhance their quality and productivity. This is proven by various successful achievements of its students in innovation and skills competitions, either on national level or international level.
Banyak ilmu dan juga pengetahuan yang lahir daripada IKTBN Sepang ini telah diadaptasi dan diguna pakai sepanjang saya bekerja di bahagian industri terutamanya.
Jutaan terima kasih kepada pihak institusi kemahiran tinggi belian Sepang kerana telah memberi peluang kepada saya untuk mempelajari pelbagai ilmu, kemahiran dan jati diri sehingga saya berjaya menamatkan pengajian saya dan berjaya menjawat jawatan yang baik di dalam kerjaya saya.
Sebenarnya pembelajaran saya di Iscnmb Sepang ini banyak membantu saya dalam melaksanakan tugas-tugas yang saya jawat sekarang sebagai maintenance di syarikat yang saya kerja sekarang.
Harapan dan doa saya semoga Iscnmb Sepang akan terus cemerlang, melahirkan ramai pelajar mahir macam saya.
Saya rasa bertuah kerana berpeluang belajar di Iscnmb Sepang di mana semua ilmu yang diperolehi banyak bantu dalam kerjaya saya hari ini. Terima kasih.
Pada pendapat saya, student-student Iscnmb Sepang ini mempunyai disiplin dan semangat yang tinggi dalam bidang industri. Melalui latihan industri dengan syarikat kami iaitu AAZ Global Sedang Berhad, kami sentiasa memantau dari segi disiplin dan performance. Oleh itu, saya menyarankan kepada industri-industri luar supaya dapat memberi peluang kepada pelajar-pelajar ini dalam sektor industri.
Tanya kepada Kementerian Belia dan Sukan, khususnya Iscnmb Sepang, kerana berjaya melahirkan ramai tenaga mahir yang telah membantu dalam perkembangan pembangunan sektor industri negara seperti syarikat AAZ Global.
The successful national transformation towards a better future are depending on the excellency of leadership and harnessing human capital to its best, especially by the youth generation of Malaysia.
Terima kasih Iscnmb Sepang.
Iscnmb Sepang, the ultimate professional provider.
Bangalore, India. I am an associate professor and a dentist by profession. I have done my master's in pediatric dentistry, that is dentistry for children. Currently, I am also a research scholar in the field of nanodentistry under the guidance of Dr. Pushpalatama. I am doing my PhD in Ramaya University of Applied Sciences. Today, I will be giving a short invited lecture on applications of nanotechnology for enhanced antibacterial activity in composite dental restorations, a review in this literature. I would like to thank the organizing team of this conference for providing me a beautiful platform and giving me an opportunity to present my paper in my area of interest. Looking forward to you for this conference. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the International Summit and Conference on Material Science, Nanotechnology and Biomanufacturing 2021. Now, I would like to invite the first presenter for this afternoon, Prof. Aritra Ghosh from University of Exeter, UK, to give a talk about transition metal oxide for self-cleaning application. I would like to invite Mr. Tinakaran to chair the session.
Thank you, Sheila. Okay, Doctor, Prof. So shall we start now? So before that, I want to share about you. You are our executive plenary lecture for this afternoon. So we have 3 more executive plenary. After you, we have 2 more executive plenary talk. All the lecture from European country. So you were the first one, sir. So without wasting your time, I would like to invite you to start your presentation, sir.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Audible.
Wondering, are you recording this session?
Yeah, we live, sir, live.
Yeah, because I need this record for my own purpose. So if I get the link later, it will be good.
Sure, sure. I will share.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes, sir. It's visible.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me for this talk. And my name is Dr. Aritra Ghosh, and today I will talk about the transition metal dope oxide for self-cleaning application. Particularly, I will focus on the solar application. I know this conference, most of the people are talking more about the material aspect, but I think I will bring some new, blended things where I will talk about firstly about the issues related to the environment, and then related to the application, and then how we can improve the problems by developing new materials. So as I am saying that, so this are the content. I will talk about the soiling issues, and that is the reason I choose the topic of the self-cleaning. And the different cleaning techniques are available for currently for soiling to clean the photovoltaic technologies, and then different self-cleaning techniques. Then what are the commercially available and what we are doing, and then finally I will conclude my overall talk. First, I want to give a brief introduction of my university. This is University of Exeter, and those who are not that much well known, this is a very much southwest location. We have 2 campuses. One is in Exeter Devon, and one is Exeter Cornwall. This is London, and we are actually 5 hours away from London by train. Our university is ranked 12 in UK, and this is 164 rank in globally. My department is renewable energy, and it started back in 2003, and this is the first undergrad course related to renewable energy in UK and Europe. And as this is the location is very, very much nice and beautiful, that is the reason this year G7 will be actually happening this Cornwall campus, and our campus has been a place for the global reporters. So it's a lovely place to visit. So if you have any chance in future, obviously come and visit here. This is happening. Oh, so this is a little brief introduction of myself. I'm assistant professor at the University of Exeter. Previously, I did my PhD and postdoc both from DIT and also in University of Exeter. Currently, I work as on different editorial activities, including Elsevier, Hindwire, and MDPI. And my primary research includes the smart window technologies and photovoltaics, also self-cleaning, storage of energy, and electric vehicles. And these are my teaching activities. Globally, we know that our energy consumption is comparatively very high for the oil, and this is 1973 data, and this is the data from 2018, and I collected this is from the International Energy Association IEA 2020, and we can see that still we are consuming a very high amount of fossil fuel, and this has a very much adverse impact. You can see that globally, because of this consumption, we are creating a lot of greenhouse gas emission, and that actually has impacted a huge amount of temperature rise. And because of this temperature rise, we are actually reducing, or we are creating a very bad damage on the ice. And this is the level of 1880 and 2012. We have found that average global temperature increased a lot. And because of that, we are, as we experienced from 1994 to 2017, that 65% of our ice has been melted. And if we check about this data from 1994 to 2017, we have lost 28 trillion of tons of ice, and this is very much equivalent to 100-meter thick sheet of ice, which is size of the UK. So what we have the solution. So we have to move towards very much fully renewable energy, and one of the renewable sources I use is the photovoltaic technology. Though we have the solution, but we still have a lot of challenges, and these challenges are, first challenge is that in case of the photovoltaics, we know that it has an issue with the temperature because of the different material aspect, and that is the reason we cannot rely on high temperature. When it has a high temperature, it actually degrades the power generation. So this is one issue, and this issue we can solve by using the different cooling technologies. We can use the cold water or cold air, or using the pump system. Then there is a prediction that cost can be an issue, but we have found that cost currently is very much lower. It's at some point here, though previously it was expected the cost will be very much high, and we have to wait till 2026 or 2050. But within 2018, we found that cost actually reduced drastically. But still we have the challenge, and this is the challenge is coming from the soiling. Globally, because of the different location, we have the mineral dust, bud droppings, pollen, engine exhaust, or agricultural emission. And we have found that because of the dust, though our globally grid-connected solar capacity increased above 500 gigawatt, and we are trying to reach the 1 terawatt, but still as there is a soiling losses, and that is the reason that we are losing a huge amount of revenue losses. So in the traditionally, our solar photovoltaic technologies have several different layers, and if we have the dust or deposition on the top of this glass, because of the different size of the particles, we are losing the lights, and that is the reason we cannot get the enough power. In more precisely, if you think about these two graphs, where you can see that different level of deposition of the dust, we can see the power losses from the photovoltaic technology, and this is a very much linear relation. That means if your dust if the transmission losses occur due to dust is 90%, obviously the power loss will be much more higher, and that if the transmission losses is low, the power loss will be lower. So this is a very much linear relation, as I can say here. Now, what is the solution? So in globally, currently I am doing a research throughout the globe and find out what is the impact of dust, and we found that not only a very clean area like here, which is cornel 5 to 7% if we don't clean, and also if we don't clean in the other places such as US, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, India, it's over 50%. Though dust deposition has different impact, it can depend on the particle size, wind, rain, moisture, tilt angle, and the module surface type, but still we can see that there is an issue with this dust deposition. So what we can do with this problem? So first solution we have that we can clean the module, right? So we have different techniques. So first is the manual cleaning. You can hire some labor and they can clean the things, or you can use the robotic cleaning, but both are not that much efficient, because if you are not that much expert, you can break the glass or you can create some scratch on the glass, and that is the reason again you have a trouble. So the best solution right now is calling the self-cleaning. So that means if you put some sort of coating material on the top of the photovoltaic system, in the presence of water, it will clean the dust automatically. You don't have to do anything, and this is my primary topic today to introduce here, that what type of self-cleaning things are available right now and what we are doing with that. So as I said, the self-cleaning means that particles are cleaned from the surface when there is a water droplets are passing on it. As we know, the dust has a strong adherence on to the water droplet than to the solid surface because of the surface tension. So water can very easily clean the dust. So generally there are two things. One is the hydrophilic coating, one is the hydrophobic coating. And because of the different contact angle they create on the glass surfaces, it can say that hydrophilic when the water contact angle is less than 90. And when the contact angle is over 90, it is called the hydrophobic. There are other two parameters, which is called the superhydrophilic and superhydrophobic. When the water contact angle is above 150, it is called the superhydrophobic, and when it is less than 5 degrees, it is called the superhydrophilic. So these all are actually very much crucial now, and if you want to create a coating material, you have to find out whether it is a superhydrophilic or hydrophilic, hydrophobic or superhydrophobic. Just to explain a bit more how they work. So if you think this is your glass surface or the photovoltaic, and this is the glass surface, and you have employed some coating on the top of it, and then when there is a dust particles is there, it actually how it works. So if your coating is a hydrophilic coating, the water actually just goes there, and because generally previously our most of the hydrophilic coating was the TiO2 based, and they are very much used with the photocatalysis process, so it breaks the organic dust in the presence of the UV when there is a sunlight, and also dissolve the inorganic dust so it can clean the surface. In case of the hydrophobic, it actually picks the dust particles and then drop from the surface. So in the these are the two basic mechanism occurs using the hydrophilic and hydrophobic coating. These are the very much currently available laws which actually explain how the self-cleaning mechanism actually working. So one is the Young's model, one is the Wenzel's, and then is the Cassie-Baxter model. I'll not go in depth with all those models, but I want to explain that basically the water and the glass has a threshold intrinsic contact angle is a 65. It's not basically 90. Now, when you actually change the surface in micro scale level, it can depends on the type of the roughness you are creating. You can have the hydrophobic or hydrophilic. And then when you again change the roughness at nanoscale level, you can have the superhydrophobic or superhydrophilic. Now, honestly, these self-cleaning technologies are more popular after 2005. If you see this graph, this is I have selected from the published journals articles, and it is found that from 2005, I think this growth of the publication increased, and currently you can see the level of here, and also superhydrophobic actually records much more higher than the superhydrophilic. Currently, these are the available company who actually deals with the superhydro self-cleaning coating technologies, and they're trying to make them a commercial product. But yes, if you just go and try to buy a self-cleaning coating, you will not probably get many more, but you can get some sort of glass if you want to buy. They probably are coated with the self-cleaning coating. This hydrophobic and hydrophilic both are actually supported by the nature, and after I think the invention of the ACM in 1950s or 60s, this research actually got more attention. And back in 1997, after this lotus effect, people became more interested with the superhydrophobic or hydrophobic nature. And in nature, we can see that there are different surfaces available which possess the hydrophobic, and we are trying to replicate those surfaces in our laboratory to find out how we can clean the surface from the photovoltaics. There is also hydrophilic surface which are available in the nature. As you can see, this is the fish scales and shark skin, tree frog dot left, and the lizard skin. So, but we have found that generally in nature, or maybe it is not expected or explored, that hydrophobic the hydrophobic are much more higher number is available compared to the hydrophilic. But the challenge with the self-cleaning with the hydrophobic or hydrophilic, particularly for the solar application, is that we have to think about that we have to make it a very transparent and low reflective index, because we know that for solar, transmission is a major issue. If you don't have the enough transparency on the top of the glass, that means your solar cells will not get that much enough amount of solar radiation. That means you will not generate that much power. And also currently our target is to employ the solar cells or photovoltaic for at least 20 years. That means your coating has to be active at least for 24 years to be operated. But honestly, we are not very close to of this, because if we want to have a coating, it should have all those values. But generally, the currently available coating materials has a very high refractive index, but we are trying to have some solution with this problem. So we can say that the current limitation or issues are the transparency, refractive index, and they are only active with the UV band. And if there is no sun, they generally don't work properly. And also there is an issue with the long-term stability. And obviously most of the people, when they work with this self-cleaning, they don't really test with the PV technology. They just manufacture it in the lab, and they just say that they have created a self-cleaning technologies. So we thought that probably zinc oxide, which is the metal oxide semiconductor, can be a very good product for our self-cleaning because of their wide application and wide variable property. In general, zinc oxide has intrinsic hydrophilic property because of the presence of the hydroxyl groups on the surface. So that is the reason we have selected the zinc oxide. Now, you can vary its self-cleaning property by modification of surface, by changing the morphology, by changing the UV visible illumination, by creating the surface defects, or employing some doping agent, or you can change with the microstructural changes. In our cases, we have tried with varying the morphology, varying the microstructure and the surface chemistry, and then we have find out what are the self-cleaning material we can have. And then we did the different characterizations such as XRD, ACM, and all those. But yes, we are still away from to do the real-time test with the photovoltaic system. Our first success came with the hydrophilic zinc oxide, where as I already said, that zinc oxide has a very much intrinsic hydrophilic property, but also zinc oxide, the structure is very much the rod one. But we found that because the nanorod structure, the transmission is very much low. So that's the reason we tried to vary the morphology, and we actually got a very good success with the transmission, though it is not above 90%, which is required, but we reached close to 87 or 88%. And here you can see also that we have got with the super hydrophilic property by just changing the morphology, not using any UV treatment. And this is our key success, and we have published this work. To have that, we use a hydrothermal system, and also we found that up to 350 degrees centigrade, this chemical, this coating is very much stable. And this is a very good point, because in general, when we do testing in the real time, in the field, generally we experience probably 100 degrees centigrade, not more than that. So this is a good work. Next, we just try to explain why we have this such good result, because we know that when we move from rod to flower to microsphere, we have different oxygen vacancies, and we know that enhanced oxygen vacancies have actually created the super hydrophilicity. And previously it was theoretically proved that when you have the oxygen vacancies improved, then your contact angle decrease. That means you are having the hydrophilic property, and when you have the low oxygen vacancies, you will have the higher contact angle. That means you have the hydrophobic. So theoretically also these things we found, and so we can say that our work is went into the right direction. Then we tried to use some doping material, which was the hafnium. The reason we choose the hafnium, because hafnium has a very much same ionic radius with the zinc. We found that first when we changed the doping from 0 to 5%, our oxygen vacancy concentration increased, and that is the reason we have the super hydrophilic or hydrophilic property. And then when we increase the further hafnium doping till 20% or 16 or 70%, we found that it is actually working as a hydrophobic one. To understand better here, we can show that here when we have increased the oxygen vacancy with the hafnium concentration, we found that the surface roughness actually increased, and also the water contact angle, and that you can see here, that is the reason the water actually sprayed. Here the structure is very much tube-like. Then when we improve the concentration again, we have found that this water contact angle and the surface both actually increase, and we got the calprotite structure, and this actually creates the hydrophobic surface. So we can actually tune from super hydrophilic to ultra hydrophobic by increasing or decreasing the hafnium doping, and this is also a very good switchability property. Not only we just experiment or investigate the material aspect, but we also did some testing, so that because we know that for the photovoltaic system, it can be placed anywhere globally, it can be domestic application, it can be industrial application. So we thought that how our coating system is actually having a good property. We tried with different other liquids such as acetone, NMP, and methyl halide. We found that with almost like this material having very similar property like water with other liquid. Also, we know that to investigate that, if we don't use the glass substrate but other substrate like quartz or silicon wafer or the ceramic or PET, how this material will work, and we found that very similar property like the glass surface. We also checked the enhanced properties, so that's why we kept this material under dust PM 2.5, dust PM 10, also the clean air and vacuum. We found that the properties didn't change that much after this testing. Currently, there is a trend that you employ your photovoltaic system near the water or on the top of the water, and there can have a chance that you are having experience of the bacterial growth. That is the reason we tried to experiment, and we found that there is no growth of bacteria on the hafnium and the hafnium both. So this is a very much good anti-fouling testing. This work is currently published in ACS-AMI. If you have interest, you can check it. But finally, we didn't achieve that much good transmission. Only with the 5% one, we got nearly 91 and 92, but rest of the percentage is not very much good for the solar application, but it can be applied for any other application where you don't have to think about only for the transmission. To have more experiment, we did another material, silicon titanium, but again, the transmission has a key issue, and that is the issue with the self-clearing. So we cannot go with this material again. Currently, as I said, there is a challenge of commercial products. So these are the one product which is available commercially. This is another product is available commercially, but again, this is the true thing is that self-cleaning is a very, very wider aspect, and there is a prospect for investigation, but yes, there is no such work is available currently, which will give you a very high transmission and also stability, and can have a very good super hydrophilic or hydrophobic or super hydrophobic property. So I want to finish my talk by explaining that self-cleaning still is a immature technology. We can have hydrophilic or hydrophobic both suitable, depends on the place you are placing your system, but transmission always plays a crucial role. We found that zinc oxide and hafnium zinc oxide both can be an influential self-cleaning coating. However, we need more further study. So at the end, I want to thank all of my members of this conference and my funding agency, PSRC, Innovate UK, and Arrange, who are supporting my research, all my past researcher and collaborator, and my research group member. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for your excellent presentation. Sir, so now I'm open. Yeah, Prof. Samo, please, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. So really an interesting lecture. I liked it very much. I'm just interested, so I'm not expert in this area, but it's very interesting for me. So you show that you said that by controlling roughness, you can switch from hydrophobic to hydrophilic behavior. Are some general rules when this happens?
I lost your voice.
Sorry, I will repeat. So you mentioned that you can switch from hydrophilic to hydrophobic just by changing roughness of the surface. Are there some general rules when this happens? Can you say something about this?
Yeah, it has like you can explain this property by using this Cassey-Baxter law, or you can change the roughness. And right now, what we did here, we changed the roughness by increasing the doping agent. Okay? We employed the hafnium, and as hafnium has a different property, when you are actually giving the 5% of the doping using with the zinc oxide, you are replacing, as I mentioned here, like you are doing here the substitutional doping, okay, here, and then your surface roughness is bit different. And when you are changing after this 5%, we don't know what happens after 20 to 50%, but we did a little work with this range. But we found that when you are doing with 5% to 20%, you have this interstitial doping. And because of this different phenomena, you can change the roughness. But yes, you cannot change this switchability after the manufacturing. But when you have to do that or during the synthesis process, you can actually change. It's not like it is changing under the sunlight or under the UV light.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting presentation indeed, and I see that this is still a challenge, and obviously there could be a lot of possibilities in terms of materials that can fulfill this role. And one possibility could be gel materials. Have you considered this type of materials, which have been already used as coatings in for self-cleaning in medical surfaces and killing different bacteria? And they also can be made in very thin layers, and they have excellent optical quality as well. So have you considered in your research using gel materials? Or maybe this has already been investigated?
It is investigated, but thanks for you asking, Isabella. The problem with the solar application is that when you create any material, sometimes they are transparent, but the transparency occurs due to the diffuse transmittance, not from the direct one. And that is also a key challenge with the solar. But for the solar application, we need more direct transmittance than the diffusion. And whatever material currently available, they actually publish the work and saying that is a very good self-cleaning property, but they don't actually work with the transmittance one. And I'm very much keen to know what transmittance level they have, because in general, when you keep the solar glass, it has actually 4% reflectance, and we only get 91% transparency. Now, if we put some layer and which gives you 90% or overall transparency 89%, that means you are reducing some point of amount of light. So whatever we have to make, we have to think that we don't decrease the amount from the 91%, but at least we have to maintain that in the 90 at least, or 91%. So this is a key challenge. We tried with the solder process right now, as I showed here, the last one, this one. And yes, our results are not that much promising with the silicon, the titanium.
Yeah, because we have been recently investing some effort into developing gel materials, and that's why it occurred to me that maybe if you add also some patterning to control the surface roughness, This could help additionally for the wettability and control of hydrophobicity, hydrophilicity, but maybe we can discuss later separately.
I'll think about it. Yeah, no worries. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Isabella. So now, any discussion or any questions from the audience to our professor? Nice topic, very brief explanations about his research, sir. And I have one question, sir. May I? Regarding the super hydrophobic and super hydrophilic, yeah, it's what we understood that about the hydrophilic, there is some issues about the swelling. Is it do you have any experience about the swelling in your solar panel during your research?
Swelling of the solar panel due to the coating?
Yeah.
You mean the swelling of the coating or swelling of the glass? Because the glass is
the panel. Yeah, the panel.
Yeah, the coating, swelling of the coating. Yeah, it has some issues. Yes, you are true, because of the different adverse environment. Most often the coatings are not that much stable on the glass surface for a longer period of time. So after probably the most, I think, in my experience right now, we are doing some research with the Liberia University, and we employed some coating system in Norway. And I think this worked only for 1 or 2 months properly, and after that it has some degradation. So yes, we have some experience with that.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. Nice explanations. And so now, any questions, any discussion with Prof. Ghosh from United Kingdom?
I have one question, Prof.
Yes, sir, please.
For example, if your product, I mean your silica or titania that possess super hydrophobic property, let's say if we put in the paint, it will degrade the properties of the material itself, or what? For example, we put your silica, your titania inside the paint, and then we apply for our houses in order to seek the properties of self-cleaning. What is your comment, Prof?
Didn't get it. What do you mean? Like if we employ the self-cleaning outdoor condition?
We put your silica, your products, your silica, your titania inside the paint, and then how about the property? Is it could be similar, or it will degrade a bit?
Well, yeah, I don't know about the silica one. We just developed this one because of this lower transparency. I'm just showing here the challenge, right? Like whenever I create some sample first, like maybe if you are a material guy, probably you will go for the ACM and XRD and attempt to see how the surface and the system has been developed. But for my case, I generally go to find out what is the transmission, because if the transmission is lower than 90%, that means we have no use of that. So that is the reason I'm just showing here, and my main focus to explain here that if you can make any kind of material which can be a very good self-cleaning property, and that can be applicable for any other application, but not for the solar application, because whatever the material or the technology I use, the key player is the transparency. Okay, so if you think about, like, my work is a smart window, which is also changes the transparency from opaque to transparent state, and this is the building window application. So now, if you just think about, you have a very clear single or double glass, and you create this silica coating, okay, and this is you cannot see through your window anymore, right? So there is no point to use that sort of self-cleaning material. So I cannot tell about this particular product, but yes, definitely you have raised a good question, and we have to think about, just forgetting for the timing about the transmission, we can just think about what are sort of the degradation occurs if we keep that outside. Yes, it's a good question.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Dr. Mustafa. Thank you, Prof, for your explanations. And any other questions from audience? Okay, sir. Thank you for your time, and thanks for the support our conference. So we end our session, sir, with you.
Thank you, Senakaran, for inviting me. I just want to say one good thing, and I'm very much pleased to see my previous professor, Isabella. If you don't know that, she was my first postdoc supervisor. I'm very much happy to see her here, and thank you for inviting me here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sheila, we can move to Professor Isabella for the next session.
Okay, sir. We move on to next presenter, Prof. Isabella Naidinova from College of Sciences and Herbs, Kevin Street, Ireland, to give a lecture about photopolymer nanocomposite materials, micro and nanostructures for holographic sensing. I would like to invite Mr. Dinakaran to chair the session.
Okay, thank you so much, Sheila. And yes, Professor Isabella, are you ready, ma'am? Professor, are you ready?
You hear me?
Yeah, I'm hear you. Prof, are you
Yeah.
ready now?
Yes, I am sharing. I don't know whether you can see my.
Yeah, it's visible, ma'am.
Yes, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just for a second there.
small
Yeah.
request, ma'am. Please switch to slideshow.
Yeah,
Slideshow mode.
sure. Yeah. Okay. So first, I would like to thank you for inviting me to present at the conference, for the tremendous amount of work linking together scientists from so many countries. And the organization has been excellent with the trial sessions, and I'm really impressed that such a wonderful event can take place even during the pandemic. And especially special thanks to Professor Dr. Pao and to our host now, Narayanan. And so today I'm going to speak about photopolymer nanocomposite materials, micro and nanostructures for holographic sensing. And this work is carried out at the Technological University of Dublin in collaboration with the University of Caen in France. And I would like to say that we are also part of recently established European University of Technology, where technological universities from different European countries
Sorry for interrupt, Professor. Your slide is not moving, ma'am. So, hello, ma'am. Sorry to interrupt you.
audio.
No, just now we lost your video, your slide. Can you start again, ma'am?
So what we practically record when we have the two beams, and in the simplest case, these are plane waves, we create an interference pattern in the area where they overlap. And then this interference pattern represents a modulation of the intensity in space. Photosensitive material data is responding differently to the intensity of light or this interference pattern. Leads to deteriorated performance at very high spatial frequencies. In nanocomposites, what we do is in addition to the monomers, we add nanoparticles, which are typically very small, a few nanometers, in order to avoid scattering. And then, as a result of the holographic recording, we redistribute the nanoparticles, so we have them spatially modulated. Their concentration is spatially modulated. And in our own experience, we have observed that the nanoparticles are positioned in the areas where there is a low polymer concentration. So they are expelled to the dark fringe areas. But other groups have investigated this, and whether the nanoparticles end up very much depend on the balance between the diffusion and the rate of polymerization of the material. So in some systems, they may be trapped if the polymerization is very fast, they may be trapped in the bright fringes. But the important thing is that they are redistributed. And why do we add nanoparticles, and why do we do the research in photopolymer materials? These are the three main reasons. We try to achieve as large as possible refractive index modulation. We would aim to have as low shrinkage due to photopolymerization as possible, because this is a very undesirable effect, because as you will see later on, shrinkage actually changes the property. course, you can have selectivity. Small molecules can diffuse, while the large molecules will be rejected by the structure. Also, these are tiny. They are patterned, so we have a spatial distribution of the zeolite nanoparticles. Another way of adding the nanoparticles in the structures, we first create the structure as a surface relief structure, and then we coat it with a nanoparticle layer. These are much thinner layers, around 200 nanometers, and they provide sensors with much faster response time. And it's much more easy to functionalize these layers because you just deposit a layer on top of the structure. While here, in the first case, you need to take care of the compatibility of the nanoparticles with the photopolymer material. And finally, we have used inkjet printing, where the nanoparticles are deposited in a very specific areas of the material. We can control the amount. We can control the location of the nanoparticles, and we can print different zeolite nanoparticles on the same layer and have sensor that is with multiple active sites for different analytes. What is the function of the nanoparticles? They change the refractive index, as I said. They modify the mechanical properties, the shrinkage and sensing property. They introduce sensing properties. So this is the 10% concentration of zeolite solution, very high percentage. And then this is just an example how they improve the dynamic range. This is the change in the refractive index modulation with time for different concentrations. And you can see how the refractive index modulation actually is improved by adding nanoparticles. This is a very small amount of nanoparticles in terms of weight percentage, but because these are porous nanoparticles, actually the volume that they occupy is much larger than 1.2 weight%. And in terms of shrinkage or mechanical stability of the layer, you can see how it significantly is improved by adding the nanoparticles. This is the one type of zeolite nanoparticles in a 40 micrometer layer, and it is brought down from 1.3 to close to 0.5. And for some of the applications like data storage, for example, it has to be in this order, 0.5% shrinkage, even lower actually. How do we know that the nanoparticles are distributed? Just an example of Raman spectroscopy. We record the grating and then we scan the Raman spectra along the grating vector. And this is the on-top layer in black. And then we have the one type of nanoparticles, AEI. This is alpha nanoparticles. And then here you see the pure nanoparticles. This peak here at around 400 inverted centimeters is not present in the photopolymer. So we have followed this peak in the mixture. For the MFI, we have followed this peak, which is not present in the pure photopolymer. And for the beta, we have followed this peak here, which is not present in the, this peak here, which is not present in the photopolymer initially. And these are the results. You see inside the grating, we have a modulation, especially with the MFI, with which we get the best results. We have a modulation which follows very closely the modulation of the intensity, while outside the grating, this modulation is actually quite random. This is just a noise. So this is how we know that the nanoparticles are redistributed. And now we are going to use this in holographic sensing. So the holographic sensors, these are simply holograms that can change their properties in the presence of the external stimuli. And we use two types of sensors, one in reflection mode and one in transmission mode. In reflection mode, the sensing happens due to swelling and shrinkage of the structure. You can imagine that reflection hologram operates as a Bragg stack, and depending on what is the period of the Bragg stack, a specific wavelength will be reflected, or it can be observed visually, or can be tested spectroscopically as here. So when we have swelling, for example, like in this case, exposure to humidity, the structure absorbs water, moisture from the air, and it was recorded in green. When exposed to 80% humidity, it becomes purely red, and if it is dried, then it becomes blue. So it can cover different range of relative humidity in the air and visually indicated. In transmission mode, because the gratings typically will diffract, they are much less wavelength selective. So they diffract multiple colors, and you can observe them from different angles. So in this case, visual indication is not very practical, not very accurate. So what we do, we measure the diffraction efficiency. So the diffraction efficiency depends on a number of parameters, especially the refractive index modulation, and it can change when analyte is absorbed, preferably in bright or dark fringes. And I'll explain how we can use the zero-white nanoparticles then. So just to recap that the holographic sensors, their properties can change due to the change in the effective refractive index, due to the refractive index modulation, or dimensional change in the structure. What are the advantages? You can have either electronic readout or visual indication. They are very thin layers, so they can be incorporated into packaging. They are very light and compact size, and for that reason, we now work on a project to develop such sensors for the European Space Agency and to be used in space, because there every gram is very precious. Then they are relatively low cost, and they can be disposable, although in a view of the recent concerns for the environment, maybe disposable is not such a good feature anymore, and they can be multiplexed. So we can have on the same layer, by patterning, we can detect multiple analytes. The research field in the holographic sensors have been very active over many years. It was started by the group of Professor Chris Wall at the University of Cambridge. And the areas in grays here, sensors that we have also contributed to develop. But as you can see, you can, by functionalizing the photonic structure, which is the hologram, you can detect from metal cations to biologically significant molecules as glucose, or you can detect pH and a lot of different analytes. What are the challenges? The main challenges is the selectivity. This is a challenge for any sensor platform, actually. And because to have a high selectivity, you need a very clever design of the functionalizing layer. The sensitivity in holographic sensors is also something that is a challenge, because you need to achieve either change in the effective refractive index or change in the refractive index modulation. This requires quite a lot of molecules. So in recent years, we have started using combined optomechanical structures to increase the sensitivity. Unfortunately, today I won't have time to focus on this, but this is one of the approaches to solve this. Visibility for the indicators is an issue because of the typically narrow angles of observation of the holograms, but we solve this by using different elements like diffusers, lenses to produce more striking and interesting patterns. The response time is controlled by the porosity, the hydrophobicity or hydrophilicity, and the thickness of the devices. And finally, maybe the biggest challenge is to prove that there are advantages over other existing technologies. And this is the main advantage, the fact that they are so lightweight. They can be used in wearable portable devices, and recently it has been shown that they can be actually compatible with the modern mobile phone technologies, with the introduction of the software processing very accurately colors, and this can be used in the visual indication. And also they are now miniature spectrometers that can be used in mobile phones. So this is also another way of integrate holographic sensors with modern technologies. So we use two types of sensors, as I said, the volume sensors and the surface sensors. And the main advantage of the volume sensors is that they are very sensitive, because the optical path of the beam is much larger. So even a small change in the properties will be accumulated in a phase change, because the beam travels longer through the material, and the maximum theoretical diffraction efficiency is 100%. In the surface gratings, they are faster in response time, they are flexible in terms of coatings, but their dynamic range is smaller. Typically, for sinusoidal grating, this is 33%, the maximum diffraction efficiency. Of course, for the volume gratings, the response time is slower, because the molecules need to diffuse over longer distances. These are the setups that we use to record transmission holograms. It's a standard two-beam holographic setup with polarization control of the two beams and also intensity control of the two beams. And this is a typical layer used to record in green. And this is the transmission grating photograph of the grating recorded in this material. In reflection mode, we use two setups, two-beam recording setup, and Denisuk mode. This is more for objects, and this is where we want to have a very accurate control of the intensity of the two beams and obtain maximum visibility of the fringes. And this is an example of a photopolymer layer sensitive in the red, and this is a reflection hologram. This is actually a mirror, and we have illuminated with white light. So in the surface gratings, we use Raman knot theory to model the diffraction efficiency. This is before analyte exposure and after analyte exposure. This phase factor here is changing. The refractive index modulation is changing, because the structure remains the same in terms of refractive index. Only the top layer changes refractive index as the layer is as the analyte is absorbed. How does zeolite work? So if we have the zeolites redistributed or coated on the surface of the layer, we get some refractive index modulation in the layer. When they absorb the analyte, this refractive index modulation changes due to the fact that the refractive index in the areas where the zeolite is also changes. And this change depends on the fraction, the volume fraction of the redistributed nanoparticles, and the difference in the refractive index of the nanoparticles and the host. And this is how we observe a change in the diffraction efficiency. Now I'm going to show you some results from MFI nanoparticles and LTL nanoparticles. Why did we choose those two nanoparticles? The first one are hydrophobic nanoparticles with very small pore openings, 5.5 angstroms, and they have very low water content. And we have studied them and we have seen that they remain empty, although they are added into the photopolymer before, of course, exposure to the analyte. And LTL is the opposite. They have quite a high water content and they are much larger pores. But during the synthesis, they can be functionalized to be able to detect metal cations. And this is what I'm going to present to you. So this is our control test environment. It was this is the chamber where we mount the hologram, then we send a white light and we look at the first diffraction order. And the light is sent to a spectrometer, and this is what we observe for different molecules as they become larger and larger. So this is methanol, ethanol, butanol. The molecule becomes larger. Also, we have used xylene, which is a different size of molecule. And what we have observed is how the spectrum changes over time. We have taken the peaks and we have plotted them, and we see that the diffraction efficiency actually increases for methanol, for the smallest molecule with the largest polarity. And for the other molecules, it decreases. And we think that, first of all, it shows selectivity to methanol. And second, we think that this is due to the fact that the higher polarity maybe leads to swelling of the whole structure, not just the change of the refractive index modulation. We have further studied this. I have a student now, Grace and Anthony, who is from India. We have studied this process through multiple cycles. Also, we have used slanted gratings. The previous were unslanted gratings where the fringes are perpendicular to the layer. These are parallel. These are slanted, which means that if we have a swelling or shrinkage, this will lead to change in the period of the grating, and we are going to observe wavelength shift. And this is exactly what he has observed here. We see repeatability in the exposure to different to the analyte, which is methanol. This is a change in diffraction efficiency. The time constants are quite high at the moment, but he has used a relatively thick layer, which is 30 microns, and we can definitely go thinner. And this is the wavelength shift. So at the moment he is modeling from the wavelength shift, we can determine the change in the average refractive index period and the Bragg angle. And from the diffraction efficiency, we can determine the change in the refractive index modulation and the thickness, which leads to change in the period and the Bragg angle, and thus extract separately the amount of change that happens in the material. But this is a work in progress at the moment. So in terms of detection of metal cations, this is work of Dr. Sab Degal, who is now a postdoc in Canada. She coated the surface gratings with zeolites, but zeolites in zoogel materials, because just zeolites, they washed away in water. And the change in diffraction efficiency is not due to the absorption of the analyte. So for that reason, we had to develop a zoogel plus LTL zeolite material and coat the structure. And this is the grating initially recorded. Then we treated at very high temperature, 220 degrees, to obtain a surface structure which is not dissolved in water, absolutely stable over time. And we coated with the zeolite in zoogel. And then we exposed to analyte and observe how the diffraction efficiency changes. So this is the sequence of events. So grating is exposed to the copper solution for 1 minute, then it's dried and measured, and then it's exposed for another 30 seconds, and this repeats. Here, these are the reference results where we have fresh water and deionized water. There is some background change, of course. And then we have the Zogel and only, and Zogel plus LTL exposed to copper. And we see that the change is much larger in this case for the Zogel with LTL. So the element that is detecting the copper is really the Zogel, not so much the LTL nanoparticles, not so much the Zogel material. So these are results for exposure to copper ions with different concentrations. This is the reference in the deionized water, and we see nicely how the it depends on the concentration. And actually, already here in 1.5 minutes of exposure, we have a very well we distinguish well between the different concentrations. And you can see here, this is after the thermal treatment. This is after the coating with the Zogel. This is a theoretical curve of the diffraction efficiency. And this gap here is between the just before exposure to the 1 millimole of copper and the exposure to 1 millimole of copper. So we are focusing now to explore this gap here, because this first step actually is quite large and implies that we should be able to achieve even better sensitivity of the layer. We have done the same experiment with copper, with calcium and lead, and these are the limit of detections for these materials, being the lowest for the lead. So we have also exposed them to sodium and potassium ions, much smaller response. And here they are all compared together. So this is deionized water, potassium and sodium, much smaller response, and significant response for dications. So practically we can detect some metal dications in water, but we can't distinguish between them yet. So the selectivity is still an issue. So we have also tested to see whether our sensing is dependent on temperature, because this is very important. And up to 35 degrees, you see that there is no much change in the response with temperature. Of course, when you go to 40 degrees, then this should be corrected. Some correction factor should be introduced. So in terms of temperature sensitive whole grounds, we use a very interesting material, which is polynipa. This is a material with lower critical solution temperature at around 32 degrees. And it switches from hydrophilic to hydrophobic state, where the water molecules are expelled from the polymer layer. And if other materials experience, most of them, thermal expansion, this material actually experiences thermal shrinkage when it goes above the critical solution temperature. And Dr. Mikucik, one of my PhD students, she developed this material for holographic recording. She has achieved very high diffraction efficiencies in transmission, actually repeatably 80%, but no theoretical limitation, and can be even higher. In transmission, she gets 4.5 10 to the minus 3, which is a very decent refractive index modulation. And in reflection, where photopolymers typically don't perform so well, is close to 2 10 to the minus 3. So this work was continued now by Dr. Irfan Muhammad, who is a PhD candidate, where he has recorded transmission and reflection gratings using the same principle of operation. In the first case,
Hello, Prof. Prof. Isabella. Are you there? Your signal lost, ma'am.
And this composition, we found out that you need to go to 8 degrees in order to start recovering the original color. And this is interesting because some goods, for example, they are, you would like to know whether they have been exposed to high temperature above the 32 degrees, and this could be an indicator, just color indicator, whether this has happened. We have also worked on Aztec gratings. This is very brief mentioning of them. This is collaboration with Dr. Ali Yetisen from Imperial College London. These are very interesting gratings because they allow for mass production of reflection programs through stamping. So practically you record transmission hologram, which gives this periodicity in this direction, and reflection hologram, which gives periodicity in the direction perpendicular to the layer. You see, they are called Aztec gratings because they very much resemble the Aztec pyramids. Then these gratings are coated with different coatings, and the wavelength of the reflected light depends on the step size and also on the refractive index of the coating. So if the refractive index changes, then the wavelength and the color changes. And these are some results. These are theoretical results, how the refractive index change leads to a shift in the reflected wavelength. These are results from glycerol in water, how when you increase the glycerol, the refractive index changes of the coating, and then the appearance changes. Just some results from different step sizes, again, how it influences the diffraction efficiency. And here you can see how the wavelength shifts as you have different concentration, for example, of glycerol in PVA. So again, depending on what is the refractive index and absorbed analyte, you can get a wavelength shift in these structures. For the humidity sensors I already mentioned, all I needed to add here is that we have a composition which is so sensitive that if you breathe on the hologram, it actually in few seconds it becomes red, and then in 270 seconds it recovers to the original stage. Of course, for some of the sensors, we don't want to have interference from humidity, and Tatiana Mikujic have developed a system where by changing the initiator, TA to MPG, we avoid having any humidity sensitivity because we want to be sensitive only to the specific analyte and not to be dependent on the humidity in the room or in the environment. And the final sensor that I would like to present is a pressure sensor. Here we simply record the reflection hologram, and by applying pressure, we change the spacing between the planes here recorded in the material, and this leads to change in the reflected color or the reflected wavelength and color appearance. The material was developed by Daryl Cody, one of my PhD students. She substituted acrylamide with diacetone acrylamide, and interestingly enough, this led to increased elasticity in the material. It also happens to be much less toxic monomer, and by optimizing the composition, she was able to improve the brightness of the holograms and to achieve close to 35% diffraction efficiency in reflection. So what we have done, we have studied this with tensile testing before. This is the hologram before and after application of pressure, which is a challenge actually to apply a uniform pressure on the material, something that we are still working, but definitely gives you a map of the applied pressure in color. And see, we have measured out also spectroscopically the response at the different areas, the blue, the green, and the red area, and the wavelength shift as was studied as a function of the applied pressure. This can be used in detection of the output of ultrasound systems for therapeutic ultrasound systems because and you can actually, if you have time, you can have a look at this YouTube video, which very briefly explains and clearly how this works. So practically it could be a visual color change or map of the output, and or it could be spectroscopical. These devices are widely used in a lot of physiotherapy practices. It's used not only for humans, it's used in veterinary practices as well. And but there is no calibration or quality control system currently available on the market. So we thought that this type of program could be something that could be useful in this respect. And these are some results that were obtained by Dr. Aritra Ghosh during his postdoc with me. We use this type of program to study the output from a lithotrip system. This is also ultrasound system, much larger output power from the ultrasound system because it's used to break down stones in kidneys. And you can see the change in color. Of course, it is much more challenging because we needed to have a tissue mimicking material because the kidney is much further away, so it's in the human body. So this tissue mimicking material is put here to mimic the distance traveled from the emitted wave, ultrasound wave, to reach the kidney. And this is the spectral shift. And finally, this could be used in security devices just by applying pressure, varying the composition and applying pressure with a hand, actually. And these are different patterns that we have been able to create. So in conclusion, I hope that I convince you that functionalized photopolymer holograms are a highly versatile sensor platform, and I gave some examples. And our future work is going to focus on integrating these sensors in microfluidic devices, in using asymmetric surface photonic structures to increase the dynamic range, the change in the diffraction efficiency. And also we are working on utilizing polarization of light. And also we are developing novel materials based on cellulose and zoogel, where the porosity can be very controllable. And also these are very stable matrices and they can be used in water solutions. And these are my collaborators, my colleagues from the Center for Industrial and Engineering Optics who have been involved in holographic research, colleagues from University of Qom, Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, Imperial College London, and collaborators from other schools in TU Dublin. Thanks very much for your attention. That's all from me.
Thank you, Professor Isabella, for your nice presentation. Very well explained. But few of your slide we missed, ma'am. Earlier of your presentation, I think due to your network issues. But finally, yeah, we get some points. And now open to our audience. So any discussion you want to discuss with Prof. Isabella, please.
Hi, Isabella. You have a really nice presentation. I just little queries. What is the very basic boundary condition for high sensitive sensor? Because you are explaining a lot of sensor applications. What is the basic boundary conditions is required for highly sensitive novel sensors?
Yeah, I mean, obviously this depends very much on the application. And I mean, sometimes obviously they are very highly sensitive sensors. I would say that holographic sensors they have the potential to be highly sensitive, but because they operate on the basis of changing the refractive index. So you won't be able to detect one or two molecules. Yes, so it won't be a single molecule sensor because you need to change the refractive index. So or it won't be let's say like cantilever sensors where just a small amount of molecules that are absorbed on the surface of the AFM cantilever, micro cantilever, you will be able to detect this. But on the other hand, they are very to have a visual indication, for example, we have been able to get less than 1% for humidity. And we are working in a sensor that is combined cantilever, bilayer cantilever with a holographic grating. There we have been able to achieve sensitivity of 0.1%. But as we all know, the sensitivity also, it's very difficult to achieve very high sensitivity in very broad range. Yes. So if you get a very high sensitivity, it will be relatively small operational range because otherwise you will saturate your sensor. Yeah. So it depends very much on the sensitivity. For example, the humidity sensor is perfectly suited for relative humidity. For the copper sensor, we still need to improve there in order to be able to work for detection of heavy metals in copper. At the moment, we have 63 ppm, and the allowed amount is in order of 1.5 ppm. So we have quite a lot distance to travel there.
Thank you so much for your nice clarification. Please proceed.
Thank you.
Professor, thank you, Professor Park, for the discussion. And Prof. Isabella, I have one query about the holographic sensor. In your slide, you have to mention that exposure to the humidity. Is it will affect to other properties when the humidity, the changes in the color of the sensor?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry, I just missed some of it.
No, exposure to the humidities. When exposed to the humidity, then you have some color changes in your research, is it? From the blue, it will affect other properties in the sensors.
For the humidity sensor, I think if I understand this correctly, probably you're asking whether if there is something else in the environment, not the humidity, it will interfere. Yeah.
Is it? Yeah.
So to be honest, we haven't tested it with other. Volatile organic components, for example, we have made sure that the humidity response is very limited. So it's in a material that it's not sensitive to humidity. But for the relative humidity, what we have done, we have ensured that it's sensitive only to humidity, not to temperature. That's what we have checked. We have checked the humidity response at different temperatures, and up to something like 45, 50 degrees temperature, we have observed that it's sensitive only to humidity. But as I said, selectivity is something that it's always we need to be careful about. But so this composition, we have studied only the response to relative humidity. If there is, this is a good idea. Probably we should try to see if in the air around there is some other components. Typically, we wouldn't like to have pollutants in the air, but we can test that. Yeah, that's a good idea. Just to maybe have some small amounts of alcohols in the air and see if this will change the humidity response. But we are absolutely sure that this is humidity response because this has been tested in humidity controlled chamber, environmentally controlled chamber, which has also, together with humidity, we can also control the temperature. And also, as I said, if you breathe on it, with the breathing, you deliver close to 100% relative humidity to the layer. It changes color immediately. It takes just few seconds because these are very thin layers. They're in order of 20 microns thick. I mean, thin in terms of photopolymer materials, thin, not in terms of generally thin layers. But it's a very good question because when you measure relative humidity, you don't typically expect to have a high concentration of other pollutants in the air.
Thank you, Professor, for your brief explanations. So, any other discussion or any other questions from the audience to Prof. Isabella? Prof. Kaushik, you want to say anything?
No, I already asked her. So it is okay. It is a satisfactory presentation and it's really nice. Thank you, Professor Isabella, to join us in our conference.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. Isabella, to support us and join this conference and you be with us this session. And thank you so much, ma'am, for your time and for your lecture today.
Thank you.
Sheila, you okay? We can go for the next presenter.
Sorry, sir, but next presenter is Dr. Nevin, but like she's not here.
Yeah, I think Dr. Nevin unable to join us for this afternoon session. Never mind. We have one presenter, if not Mr. Navami. Yeah, maybe she can continue for this afternoon session.
Sorry, sir, who?
Navami Gopan, Dr. Navami Gopan.
But it's not in my script.
Okay. Dr. Navami Gopan, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Are you ready to present?
Yes, sir, I'm ready.
Yeah, please go ahead, ma'am.
And on the right side, we see the calculated change of the temperature due to electrocaloric effects. So this temperature. So we also see that the largest response is also slightly above the bulk of isotropic to pneumatic transition. And we also see that we have larger response in temperature change in the transition between isotropic and pneumatic phase. So this is R is not just one, it's R slightly above this transition because of electrical field. In theoretical analysis, we prove that the strongest possible response is also near the phase transition. We have studied the transition from isotropic to smectic phase, but we also have just preliminary results. But the results suggest that the direct isotropic to smectic phase could give us even a better ECE electrocaloric effect response. So now we go to the experiment. And in the experiment, we were measuring the specific heat of the system as a function of the temperature using the high resolution telemetry. In our theoretical analysis that we performed, suggested that we could get response up to 1 Kelvin. The responses up to 1 Kelvin could already be used for application. So in the first experiment, when we use 8 CB liquid crystal molecules and electrical fields of 10 kilovolt per centimeter, we get roughly 1.4 Kelvin, which corresponds to our simulation. And the optimal ratio between the change of the temperature and the change of electrical field show 2 times 10 on minus 2 Kelvin centimeters per kilovolt. This is very good results, and such materials are also very good for practical application. But when the experiment was made with the 12 CB liquid crystals, we see this below. We see the direct transition between isotropic to smectic A phase, and the diagram show that the response is almost 6.5 Kelvin, which is the largest so far increase in the temperature induced by adiabatical changes in the electric field achieved experimentally. And we have to know that this response is at the room temperature. So if we go a little back, here we see there is the second order transition and the first order transition. And if we continue, we see that first order transition from isotropic to nematic is here, and second order from nematic to smectic is here. So this second order is much lower than as according to our simulation. So if we continue how to use this, we see that we can establish even larger temperature gradients if we just move liquid crystal between two parts of the system. Let's suppose that these liquid crystals we can shift into position A or into position B. And if we move them to the left, so in the position A, then there is electrical field and liquid crystal gets aligned. If we shift it to the position B, there is no electrical field and the liquid crystal goes to isotropic phase, so they are in disorder. So what happens if we shift them to the A? That means that we decrease the entropy and the thermal part of the entropy increases, so we get heat. And if we put it to the state B, then the orientational part of the entropy increases. Therefore, because the sum has to be zero, the temperature part of the entropy has to go down. So we have drop the temperature in the LC. If we perform the shift adequately with the frequency, then we can get the difference between site A and site B even further. So to explain this in steps, we have initial step where we have temperature at the site A and site B equal. Then we shift liquid crystals to the A, and as we can see, the temperature rises and the temperature dissipates into the surrounding. So we have to wait here a little time that this temperature dissipate, and afterward we shift liquid crystals to the side B, where they become disoriented and their temperature drops. After the time, because their temperature drops, they take the temperature from the side B surrounding, and if we continue this, we see that we can have multiplication of the single effect. In one cycle, when we use the adequate liquid crystals, we see that we can get roughly 6 Kelvin difference. but our experiment with the 12 CB molecules shows that we can get in Weiss cycle also 6.5 Kelvin. And simulation that we made using this approach shows that if we have the optimal frequency of shifting liquid crystal between site A and B, the delta T, so the increase of temperature, can be much higher. So the simulation shows that we can be even at the factor 10, so we can make very large temperature gradients. Another possible application is also this. As you can see, where we do not actually shift liquid crystal, we put them in the middle between two thermal diodes. So this is electrocaloric material, like liquid crystals, and we have thermal diode A and thermal diode B. Thermal diode is have electrically changed behavior. They can become either isolator or conductor, depending on electrical current. So when we apply electrical field, what happens? If we switch this connection, so we actually makes this diode to become isolator, and because the liquid crystal are in electrical field, they align and they heat up. Because it heat up, this heat can be transferred to the side, to the top. And when we switch the electrical connector to the B, this means that the diode at the bottom becomes insulator, the diode at the top becomes conductor, the liquid crystal becomes disoriented, and later on, because of the decreased temperature, it draws the temperature from the bottom so that we get a very efficient refrigerator. I would like to thanks to other members of this research. So this is our Professor Eva Klemencic and our Professor Dr. Samu Kral. You have already seen him, but there is also for all other who participate in this. And I would also thank you for listening to this presentation. And I think it's how to turn it off. Stop sharing. I can come back.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
Okay, Mariam. Thank you very much for the nice speech. So it is very informative. So are there any questions to him?
Hello, Professor Karsana. Thanks for your nice presentation. Happy to see you from Mariwar. So I would like to ask you for my queries. I am also working on liquid crystals. So based on, did you try it experimentally? What is the difference of textual phase pattern of smectic C, nematic? Did you try it?
The experiment was done at the Institute of George Stefan. We got these differences between the length of the molecules. They were trying 5 CB, 8 CB, and 12 CB. And as you did see, we got even better than simulated results. But we have to know that this is laboratory results and it's up to the industry to exploit it. So Samo Kral is now here. Hello, Samo. If you hear the question.
We improved greatly. So we just tried with isotropic nematic, isotropic smectic A at the moment. So we are interested to find the system in which there will be the largest entropy change. phase transition. And so far we also observed that we can increase very strongly this effect if we add nanoparticles. Because you have this electrocaloric effect, what Marian had problems in his study, you know, you have this a lot of ions inside. And so because of ions, they move. And when the ions move, you have this dissipation. And so this reduces the electrocaloric effect. But if you have nanoparticles, they are very efficient in trapping ions. And so this increases the electrocaloric effect quite a lot. But so far, we were just, you know, at the moment, we were just using NCB liquid crystals because we have them, but we would like to use also other liquid crystals. So it is important to have large latent heat change. This is key fact. And so we observed that this response is really great. You have to be close to the phase transition because you have to have the greatest change in orientation and entropy.
Nice. Great. So actually, everything you are doing through simulated patterns, I think. By
we are doing both. Yeah, with Marian, he's he's the best in these simulations and things like that. And our colleagues in Ljubljana, they are performing experiments. So this is a of Stefan, and so they are doing high resolution calorimetry.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Prasanna from Mariwar. And I have also done few works with Professor Samo. So you are most welcome. We have a lot of publication with Professor Samo. And in the others participants, if any question, please ask. If you have any question.
Professor, I have a query. Professor Marjan, I have a query. So did you find any difference in caloric effect of pure smectic, pure nematic, or some? There are some liquid crystals which are showing both smectic and nematic phase. So what are the differences have you find out between these, among these?
So you mean from isotropic to nematic and nematic to smectic?
Yes.
Yes, as you can see, there is a bigger electrocaloric effect if we go directly from isotropic to smectic phase. If we go in between these, if we use the shorter molecules, then the response, electrocaloric response is lower, actually much lower.
In case of pure smectic.
So if we go to pure smectic, if we use larger molecules, then the electrocaloric effects is much larger.
Okay.
I would just like to comment here, you know, if you have smectic ordering, you see the smectic ordering effectively acts as a field. Because if you have smectic ordering, it would like to strongly align molecules along the layers. And so it's similar to electric field. So if you have just liquid crystals, nematic liquid crystal, you see, then if we have just nematic liquid crystal, it is just affected by the field. But if we have smectic, then you have field, and you have this also, in addition, this molecular field. For this reason, this is so effective.
This is for pure smectic and pure nematic, but there are certain transitions, certain molecules which show smectic to nematic, and then it will go to isotropic. Then what happens in that case, Professor?
Sorry?
There are certain molecules which are showing smectic to nematic, and then it will go to isotropic.
Yeah, it is just important that you go from phase when you have high entropy to low entropy. And so it is used to exploit isotropic and to some phase that is ordered. And in the main interest is the largest entropy change. So this shows that is the most effective. This, in fact, Marian has shown this. So he derived analytically. He done excellent work. So he was so skilled to derive this analytically, and you can immediately see that latent is the most important.
So higher is the entropy, higher is the caloric effect.
No, the sum of the entropy is zero. So if yes, because the part of the entropy has to be if we have positional entropy. If it goes up, then the electrocaloric has to go down, because the sum has to be zero because of adiabatical change.
Okay, Professor. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I think there is no any other question. Is that right? Okay, thank you, Marian, with your speech. It's very nice, and Maribor is a very nice place too. I visited there, so okay. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, and thank organizers for this great conference, despite we are on different parts of the world.
Yes, yes, that's right.
A good job.
Yes, that's right. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Marjan Krasna, for the interesting presentation, and Professor Iscnmb for chairing this session. Before we move on, Dr. Marjan, are you there?
Yes, I'm still here, yes.
Dr. Marjan, would you like to be the next chairperson for our next presenter?
Oh, well, thank you. I will introduce our colleague. So we have the next talk will be from Alexander Zidashek. He's also our colleague at the Faculty of Natural Science and Mathematics, and he's also from the Institute Joseph Stefan and the Postgraduate School. And he is going to present his topic about the form liquid crystals to nanoelectronics. I think it's already prepared. So, Alexander, you're on. Microphone.
Thank you, Marian, for this very nice introduction, and also many thanks to the organizer, especially Professor Pal, for a really very kind invitation. So now, as I am sharing my screen, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to tell this story about, so I will share what we have been doing in liquid crystals, what we are doing now, and where we are heading to, and also present some opportunities for the near future. So let me just start the presentation. Okay, here we go. As Marian already mentioned, I come from actually 3 different institutions: Faculty of Natural Sciences and Mathematics, University of Maribor, and also Joseph Stefan Institute and Joseph Stefan International Postgraduate School. And this talk, I will also use the material that have been prepared jointly with Professor Samo Kralj and Gojmir Lahainer, and also the part on nanoelectronics with Professor Uroš Cvelbar and the graduate student Aswati Vasudevan, both from Joseph Stefan Institute. And I would like to acknowledge the financial support from Slovenian Research Agency in the program listed here. The background that we are talking about, we're talking about nanoelectronics. We also use the word edge electronics. So here, why we need this nanoelectronics? Everybody knows Moore's law. You remember Gordon Moore was the head of Intel that was doing microchips, and one day they had a lunch, and on the napkin he wrote like this distribution between the number of transistors and the time. And every 2 years, this number actually doubles, which means that that was like 50 years ago, but it has held steady for the past 50, 60 years, which means that, yeah, this number of transistors is increasing, the speed is increasing, and the sizes are going down, and the sizes cannot go down below one molecule, below one atom. So something new has to be done in order to continue this progress. You know, this progress is something that is driving both our economy and science and technology and our way of life, introducing new devices every couple of years and allowing us to solve difficult challenges and also to improve the quality of life for everybody, because almost everybody has the access to these devices. So one way forward would be the quantum computers. You know, they can improve the processing power even at the same size, and that's how we could avoid the Moore's law hitting the physical barriers. And of course, that means that new computer architecture is required, which uses quantum qubits instead of classical bits. And as we know, the liquid crystals were actually one of the first model substances for the quantum computer. In the 1990s already, there were the first like quantum computers. So there was like 2-bit quantum computer made out of liquid crystals using nuclear magnetic resonance. So that was basically the work of Dr. Isaac Chuang from IBM and his colleagues. That was actually the early part, which was not really useful. You cannot do much with 2-bit computer. You need at least a few hundred or a few thousand bits or even more. But anyway, what has been going on since then was really huge progress, even if we're talking about liquid crystals. So for example, a couple of years ago at Caltech, they discovered 3-dimensional quantum liquid crystals, which are not really this classical liquid crystals that we are used to. You know, it's not about molecules, but it's about nematic phase transition in the spin orbit of the coupled metal, which means that liquid crystals are not only made of molecules, but they can also be made on subatomic scale, which is quite weird and also really very promising for applications in electro-optics and in all the electronic devices that are necessary in order to continue with this really fast progress of the Moore law. So if we're talking about liquid crystals, I will not make a long introduction because they have had quite a lot of talks on liquid crystals. We combine the properties of liquid and of crystals. They can be either thermotropic, lyotropic, or metallotropic, and we are mainly interested in thermotropic. So for example, orientational ordering, where we have phases like nematic phase. This is something like, I mean, we have studied this a lot with nuclear magnetic resonance, where you can really see very nicely, like deuteron NMR was like a method of choice that we used like a long time ago, and we could see the nematic transitions really very nicely. Smectic transition is, however, a little bit more difficult to see with nuclear magnetic resonance, for example, from coupling between nematic and smectic phase. However, if you want to see it better, then you go to other methods like X-rays. So small angle X-ray scattering was actually the method of choice that we use for observing smectic phases in the liquid crystals. And you can really see very precisely both the layer distance, the order parameter, and also the uniformity and the correlation length. Then there are other phases, of course, chiral, twisted, discotic, and conic. And among these phases, so most of our work has been actually focused on nematic phases and on the smectic phases. Then as we continue, if we want to use these liquid crystals, then we have to apply some effects that are really useful for like optoelectronics or computing devices. So electric and magnetic field are the most obvious properties which could, external effects which could affect liquid crystals. And we know that there is a lot going on in this field. With electric or magnetic field, you can actually modify the properties, change the phases, and use this for electro-optical devices. Then defects are another area which has attracted a lot of interest recently, because if you can like manufacture the defects, calculate them, you can actually have a lot of interesting physics related to the defects. Then surface effects are a very particular part of these defects. And another issue is the confinement. where we have been working on for the last 20, 25 years, maybe more. And we are particularly focused on the confinement in aerogels or in contact pore glasses, where you have very uniform matrices. And this confinement effects actually also changes the phase transition, both the nature and the temperature of phase transitions, which is actually very important for all the applications in liquid crystal. So for example, here you can see one scanning electron microscope picture of such glass where we put liquid crystals inside. So the dark parts are actually the holes, and that's where, so the cylindrical interconnected holes, that's where we put the liquid crystal in the vacuum conditions so that they enter the holes, they fill them completely. And then this is a wonderful modeling system to study the behavior of pneumatic and smectic phases inside such a confined system. As we want to talk about applications in nanoelectronics, then of course, what is meant by this nanoelectronics? You know, everybody is familiar with microelectronics. You know, before microelectronics, like after World War II, the first computer, they were made like vacuum tubes and those huge devices, which would be like one whole room and less computing power than your phone in your pocket. But then microelectronics revolution with transistors and microchips actually allowed this current civilization in the 1960s. And for the last 50 years, this has been actually the pinnacle of civilization, of technology. But now what we need is actually more, because we are reaching the physical limits. So the chips have to get smaller, which means that we need to explore the possibilities of how to use single molecule electronics, how to use one layer like graphene sheets in these electronic devices. So we're talking about solid state electronics. On one hand, quantum liquid crystals are like a very interesting opportunity. On the other hand, two-dimensional materials. So we're talking about graphene, and if you attach some other materials to graphene, that of course enhances, improves its properties, and it can actually be used as a simple electronic device. And since this is no longer microscale, this is nanoscale, you know, one layer of graphene, we're talking about nanometers, so that's why it can be called nanoelectronics. And also people use the word edge electronics because you have a small sheet of graphene, and at the edges, the interesting effects are happening. So that's what I would like to introduce to you. Actually, in the past few years, one of our graduate students, I mentioned in the introduction, Swati Vasudevan, has been working with such small sheets of graphene, and she's attaching actually the gold atoms on the edge of this graphene, and this has very interesting property, which I will show you in the continuation. So for example, this is a picture. What you do is, you see there is graphene in the middle, and around it you put the gold atoms, and the spins of the electrons actually allow for the current that goes around this edge. And this currents, you know, if you have very small devices with electric currents, that means you can modify the electric properties, which can be used then further in the electronic devices. So this is kind of one opportunity, one pathway toward the nanoelectronics. And it's called edge electronics because the important effects are actually happening on the edge of this graphene sheet. So this is one way. The other way is about quantum liquid crystals, which have been discovered in Caltech actually in 1999 by Jim Eisenstein. And like 5 years ago, there was actually another breakthrough by Harter, Xiang, and their colleagues. The idea is here that you get the nematic phase in spin-orbit coupled matter, which is actually a great opportunity for electro-optic applications. So this is something we are still considering to tackle also this field, but it's really a very, very promising one. So that's why I included this in this presentation. It also is promising in quantum computing applications. We are talking about 2D materials that we are currently focused on. Mainly these are conductors, semiconductors, and insulators that are listed here. You see among conductors, 2D metals are like very promising. Carbon-based materials, carbon-based, that means graphene and similar, are actually the ones that that can be produced in our labs. And among semiconductors, you also have very similar materials. There is a long list of materials which can be produced and can be then used. And semiconductors are very important in on electronic devices. And then insulators, of course, can also be
Founded on the 16th of December 1960. The Ankara University Faculty of Pharmacy was founded on the 16th of December 1960, and education was introduced in the academic year of 1961 and 1962. It was the second institution introducing a program in pharmacy in Turkey. However, Ankara University Faculty of Pharmacy was the first faculty of pharmacy founded in Turkey. The faculty was managed by a core team with limited resources in the founding and early years. In 1970, 10 years after its founding, Ankara University Faculty of Pharmacy has made remarkable developments in every area of pharmaceutical science. Today, Ankara University Faculty of Pharmacy consists of 23,000 square metre of closed area. Our faculty has 3 lecture halls with 160 seats each and 12 classrooms with various sizes. To qualify as a pharmacist, the education takes a minimum of 5 years, and the students must be successful in lab courses of analytical chemistry, biochemistry, pharmaceutical microbiology, pharmacognosy, pharmaceutical botany, pharmaceutical chemistry, pharmaceutical technology, and pharmaceutical toxology. Additionally, our faculty have 2 conference halls and 1 meeting room with 400, 260 seats respectively. All meeting rooms are in the service of the students. The recently established Pharmacy Museum devises and
materials for environmental application. So the Prof. Joe is our one of the executive plenary lecture for this conference. So without wasting his time, so I would like to invite Prof. Joe to start his presentation.
Okay, many thanks for the introduction and many thanks for the invitation. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Okay, let's see. Yep.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
It's visible, sir. Visible.
Yeah, okay. Many thanks. So again, many thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to join you this morning in Portugal, in afternoon in Malaysia and India, and most of and other time zones, I'm sure. So I want to talk about a little bit about carbon materials for environmental application. First of all, where I came from, well, in fact, where I'm high, because I was not flying to Malaysia, of course. So I'm based in Portugal. As you might know, Portugal is the western country of Europe. And in particular, I'm based in Évora, which is right in the middle of the country, right here. So to give you a brief flavor of my city and the university where I'm based on, this is a few pictures of the city and my university as well. So it's a very old city, full of history. So when possible, when the pandemic is over, you should come and visit us. We are a pleasure to welcome you here. Okay, so let's start. I will split the talk into 2 parts. First part, I will be talking about the materials, carbon materials, the precursor that we have used to produce carbon materials, the methods and the characterization. And then I will end up by talking about applications, which is removal of inorganic and pharmaceuticals. And I will give you the last part. I will give another application, which is in health application. So we have 20 years of experience of producing carbon materials, mainly activated carbons and activated carbon fibers. You can see here on the top the physical forms of the materials. It can be in powder, granular, or in pellets. And this is the schematic structure of what is an activated carbon. Basically, is a turbostratic structure filled with holes. These holes here are pores of that activated carbon has. This is a schematic structure. And then the activated carbon fibers, the difference between activated carbon fibers and activated carbons are the filamentous structure of the fibers. And more importantly, you can see in the bottom, in the activated carbons, the porous network is more complex. It starts with a micropores, so big pores, and then goes to mesopores, and finally to micropores, where most of the absorption takes place. When it comes to activated carbon fibers, on the left-hand side here, the micropores open up to the surface. So in a way, the sites where most of the absorption takes place open up straight away to the surface of the material. And that's the major difference. Why I can call the carbon superpowers? Why can I compare the carbon materials with a Superman? So there are quite of characteristics of the carbon material that gives the materials that superpowers. The porous structure, the carbon materials, activated carbons and fibers are like a sponge. They can absorb many, many things. Allied with this porous structure, we have a surface chemistry, which is very rich, and surface chemistry promotes also the absorption, and not only the absorption to be a catalyst, for instance, in some reactions. They are very stable and they are very resistant, mechanical resistant, so which is quite important for specific applications as well. The industrial production is very known, and these carbon materials are produced for many, many years now. So we have quite established, very well established industrial production methods. And also we can use a lot of precursors to produce activated carbons. And this is quite important because we can use weights, for instance, as I'm going to show a little bit later. And these weights is part, using the weights is part of circular economy that is on so much be talking in these days. Regarding our work and the work that I'm going to show you now, today, we have used as precursors for the activated carbons waste or residues from agricultural activities, which are sunflower, corn, and vine shots, because in my own region, we have a lot of these three cultures, and also two industrial residues. One of is the coffee and the carp. We have a roasting industry, coffee roasting industry nearby. So we don't have coffee trees here, but we receive the coffee beans, and covering the coffee beans, we have the endocarp, which has to be removed before the roasting process. So this is an industrial residue, and we have used this endocarp to produce activated carbons. And also the eucalyptus pulp, because we have nearby as well a pulp mill factory. Using these 5 different precursors, we have used 2 different methods for the production of activated carbons. First of all, with the carbon dioxide. So basically, we have used this horizontal furnace, and then with the heating process, starting by the carbonization. and a nitrogen flow, and then followed by an activation step with a carbon dioxide flow, which means that when the system reach out this temperature, we change the gas to the activating gas, which is activated and to promote activation of the materials. And then we have used as well the water steam. The process is a little bit different. It's a heating process as well with a pyrolysis. The carbonization, we have used a slightly higher temperature, but then we have done the activation with steam, which are diluted in nitrogen flow for 1 hour into these 3 different temperatures. Besides the laboratory made carbons, we have used 3 commercial carbons just to compare the work that we are doing. Quinol, which is an activated carbon fiber, and 2 carbons from Norwich. This on the right hand side, you can find it in the regular pharmacies in many countries. They are used for many purposes. And this in the middle, the carbon mix. This is used in hospital settings to treat, for instance, overdose provoked by pharmaceuticals. So basically, when you reach the hospitals, the ICU with an overdose of a pharmaceutical that you might have taken accidentally or in purpose, what the medical doctors gives people is a batch of carbon mix to absorb the pharmaceutical before getting absorbed by the human body. We have done also 2 post-production modifications just to study how can the absorption capacity can be increased. We have done an oxidation with nitric acid and the impregnation with 3-ethylenediamine tether using a process which has been patented in the USA. You can see here the procedure here. I won't talk in detail about these 2 procedures, but just to give you an idea of what was done. Regarding the characterization, and those that are not so familiar with this nomenclature, this is the porous characteristics of the materials. This is the surface area done by the BAT method, and just focus on this column here, which is the pore volume. So this is meaning that 1 gram of the material has as a available area for absorption 567 square meters. Okay, and then on the right hand side, the last column is the point of zero charge, which gives an idea of the acidic and basic characteristics of the materials. So these are carbons made from coffee endocarp, vine shots, and sunflower. You can see here that the materials has a very interesting porous characteristics. And then when you can find this T is the materials that were post-modification by tether. You can see here that the tether does not change a lot the porous characteristics, neither the acidity of the surface, but the molecular was included on the structure, and that has a significant impact for the absorption or of many things that I'm going to show you later on. Regarding the oxidation, it has a bigger impact on the materials, a decrease on the porosity, but more importantly, a decrease on the acidity of the material. So the material went from a basic material to a very acidic material. And this has an impact as well on the characteristics of the carbon, and the surface characteristics of the carbon are highly important for the absorption of, for instance, inorganic substances. Just to give you flavor of what materials look like. You can see here again quite basic materials. These are pulp and foam cork, and again the porous characteristics are very interesting. So it means that these materials are or can be very interesting to use into studying the absorption of inorganic and pharmaceuticals, as I'm going to show you. Regarding the commercial products, you can see here that the surface area and the porous structure is a bit higher than the material that we have produced. So in a way, when we compare the commercial products with our own products, we have to take this into account as well. Just to give you a slightly vision of the materials, these are scanning electron microscopy figures. You can see this is quite, from my point of view, the figures are quite interesting from the visual point of view, but this is quite regular when we produce activated carbons from biomass, which it was our case. And then you can see here the structure of the material quite nicely, but this does not tell you much than that. So regarding the applications, which for me is the most important thing on today's lecture, we have used these materials for environmental applications, meaning that we have tested for 2 inorganic pollutants, phenol and mercury, and 2 pharmaceuticals, 2 widely pharmaceuticals used in many countries, methicillin and fluoxetine, 2 antidepressants. So regarding, first of all, the phenolic compounds, the phenolic compounds can be quite toxic to the human body, as you can see here. You can if you intake phenol, you can have cancer because the phenol is cancerogenic, and you can have also heart, kidney, and liver damage. So it's still a pollutant. This is very worrying for us. Where it's coming from, there are 2 sources of phenol, basically anthropogenic sources, because there are still existing a lot of industries that produces phenol as an effluent, but also we have natural sources of phenol, which includes the decomposition of dead plants and animals. So this phenol goes into water streams and ultimately gets into our body via drinking water, for instance, which has made the Environmental Protection Agency of the USA, EPA, and the European Commission to set up very strict rules for phenol in drinking waters, which is 0.5 micrograms per liter. So this very small admissible concentration of phenol in water needs industries that are not discharging phenol, and needs the development of processes of absorbing phenol before getting into our water streams. So that's what I have done. We have studied absorption of phenol into our carbon materials. You can see here the maximum capacity of absorption of phenol absorption for the material that we have studied. The amount absorbed are very interesting, and this amount of 190 milligrams per gram of carbon is a very interesting amount. It prevents phenol to get into water streams. And if you want to compare, if you want to study what is the process of absorption, what is the mechanism of absorption, if we pick up the pristine carbons, meaning the carbons without any modification. You can see here that the amount of phenol that is absorbed, which is on the right-hand side columns here, if we put for the same carbons the porous characteristics, which are here, you can see that is a direct correlation between the phenol absorption and the porous characteristics of the carbon, meaning that the higher the porous the higher the porous area and the porous volume of the carbon, the higher the amount of phenol that is absorbed. More interestingly, if we compare the materials before and after the post-modification with TEDA, you can see that the absorption of phenol almost doubles when we have used the materials, carbon materials with modification. Okay, so meaning that if you want to promote the absorption of phenol, you can use this post-modification to increase the absorption of phenol. Why? Because there are two quite illustrative features here, which was done by molecular simulation. This is the phenol molecules, which are absorbed in the, well, basically, this is quite simple because for doing molecular simulation, we have to say to the program that we have a sheet of carbon material. Of course, that in reality, the activated carbon are not composed by a single sheet of carbon material, but that's the way it is. That's the way the molecular simulation works. So if you include here a TEDA molecule in the structure, this promotes the pi-pi interaction, so the dispersive interactions between the delocalized electrons of the phenol molecule with the structure of the carbon material, because we have here a lot of electrons which are delocalized as well, and by attaching TEDA to the structure, we are promoting this pi-pi interaction. This is a more complex figure, but what I would like to point out is that depending on the carbon material, depending on the carbon characteristics, surface characteristics, but also on the structure of the molecule, which is phenol, you can see here this line is the phenol ionization. Well, of course, is linked with pH. When we increase the pH, the phenol will start to be ionized. So negative, this will be passed from a neutral to a negative molecule. Okay, the line here is the point of zero charge. So the materials have a negative surface when the pH is higher than the point of zero charge. You can see here in this area is that no matter the charge of the carbon, the absorption does not vary that much, which means that in this area, which are promoting the absorption is the dispersive interactions. But then when the phenol becomes to start ionized, which means that the phenol molecule will acquire a negative charge, the absorption will decrease significantly. Which does it mean? It means that in this area, the driving force for absorption is no longer a dispersive interaction, but electrostatic repulsion, because both the molecule of the phenol and the surface of the carbon are negative, so they repel each other. When it comes to mercury, as you most probably know, is a highly toxic element because it can be bioaccumulated in our body. So it can be stored in liver, kidneys, brain, spleen, and bone, and it can kill you quite easily. If you ingest a dose which is less than 0.5 grams, it can be fatal to a human body. This is still worrying in many areas of Earth. They are still used in thermometers, in pumps, in lamps, in gold refineries in some parts of Africa, for instance. So, in fact, there are still a lot of mercury around us. And the USA agency has set a limit of 2 micrograms per liter for the drinking water. So it's needed to have materials that can absorb mercury in order to prevent it to get into our food chain. Mercury, I'm talking not only about mercury, metallic mercury, but more importantly, mercury that is in the inorganic format. Most of the times in these complexes, and these complexes, the chlorine complexes, are more absorbable by our human body. So they are more dangerous than the metallic mercury in a way. What we have done, we have studied the materials that we have produced from vine shots, coffee and carb as well, with and without modification. Again, the T at the end of the nomenclature means that this material was impregnated with tether, and we can see here the maximum absorption capacity for the three mercury species. And we can see that the absorption capacity of the materials have this structure. And then again, if you look at these two, you can see that tether, the modification that we have introduced, has increased a lot the amount that is absorbed by the carbons. Okay. If you look now on the material that was oxidized, again, this net surface change was because the acidity of the carbon material has changed a lot when you oxidize the carbon. So the point of their charge has moved to 2, meaning that in this case the net surface area is positive, here is negative, and that's why this carbon absorbs so low amount of this mercury species because of the electrostatic repulsion, and that's why this amount is so high, because you have electrostatic absorption. Okay, this mercury species here, because this species is not charged, so it has a less impact on the absorption. So bottom line, if we compare the activated carbons with the Superman, you can see that the supercarbons get water clean with the help of the Captain tether, which, as you could see, this modification was quite beneficial for the absorption of phenol and mercury. When it comes to pharmaceuticals, pharmaceuticals are a huge problem all around the globe, because the pharmaceuticals are being discharged to a normal waste, and when you put the pills, the pharmaceutical that you are not using any longer, into a regular trash bin, it goes into our water streams. And also the metabolized pharmaceuticals and part of the non-metabolized pharmaceuticals that are not absorbed by human body gets into the water streams as well. So that's why in many countries we are talking about emerging pollutants. And also I've read last week a position paper saying that the endocrine disruptors are quite is having a quite impactful problem in our body, because these pharmaceuticals that are endocrine disruptors are messing around with our endocrine system, and they are causing a lot of health problems. And the expectation that in the next year the problems will be even higher. And so that's why we have to remove it from our streams as well. We have studied two antidepressants which are widely used, at least in Europe, which is amitriptyline, AMT, and fluoxetine. Fluoxetine is the active principle of Prozac. And in fact, in Portugal at least, a few days ago, there was a newspaper article that was saying that during the pandemic, the consume of these substances was even higher. So the number of boxes of Prozac that was sold in Portugal during the pandemic has increased a lot because people are in lockdown, and one of the issues of the pandemic, rather besides COVID, of course, and the COVID impact, is the mental health impact, which is very, very big. Okay, AMT. This is the what looks like our experimental output. So we produce these isotherms of absorption. You can see here the amount of absorption in milligrams per gram of carbon. And you can see here that is a plateau most of the times, meaning that from here you can take out the maximum absorption capacity of the materials. This very, very fast approach to the plateau means that the absorption is very fast. It has a high kinetic property. And also you can see here that the amount absorbed is very much related with the surface characteristics, porous characteristics of the materials as well, which was quite interesting for us when we studied the influence of the pH in the absorption of this pharmaceutical. You can see that there was no major change in the absorption with pH, which means that the absorption was not determined by electrostatic interactions, meaning that electrostatic interaction was not the driving force for absorption. So it might be linked also with specific chemical interactions with this specific nitrogen group, with the functional groups of the surface of the carbons. When it comes to the fluoxetine, which is the principal type of Prozac, as I told you, you can see here again this T here means that the material was impregnated with tether. Again, the absorption of fluoxetine has doubled. So again, the use of tether for doing the post-modification of the carbons are quite beneficial for the absorption. Here, the possible mechanisms are the PP interactions, some electrostatic interactions, because fluoxetine has this group here which has a charge, and some specific interactions as well. Okay, you can see here some what we think that is the possible absorption mechanisms. But also, and I'm looking at the time, I think I'm okay with the time. We have studied health applications, meaning that it's very important to remove the pollutants from the water streams, but it's also very important to study when someone takes an overdose of pharmaceutical, if our carbons are able to help out in the process of absorption of the pharmaceutical before getting absorbed by the body. So we have studied the removal of these 4 pharmaceuticals. So again, EMT and fluoxetine, and then paracetamol and naproxen. Paracetamol is quite quite widely used. You might think that paracetamol is quite inoffensive, which is not. It has a lot. It has an impact in our human body when taken in the huge amounts, of course. So we have studied the removal of these 4 pharmaceuticals from gastric and intestinal simulated fluids. Why? Because I think you might know that gastric fluid has a pH of 1.2 and intestinal fluid pH around 7.5. So it is important to study under these simulated conditions and these simulated conditions, because when you take some pharmaceutical, a drug, it goes, of course, into this digestive system. First of all, it gets into stomach and then into intestine. And in some cases, it's very important to get the drug absorbed into the carbon in the gastric system before it gets into intestinal system, because the drug might be absorbed by the body here. So if you trap it before getting where the drug is absorbed by human body, here in the stomach, it will be, of course, better, and it will prevent major damage. So regarding EMT again, this is the carbon mix, and carbon mix, of course, has a higher absorption capacity, which is around 500 and pH 7.5, 300 pH 1.2. Our carbons reach the maximum 120. So what does it mean? It means that the carbon, if you remember, the porous characteristics of the carbon mix are much higher than our material. That's why the absorption is higher. So when it comes to our materials, which was quite interesting to see, is that our materials are different from the carbon mix. They are absorbing more AMT under the gastric conditions than at pH 7.5, which are regulated by dispersive interactions and specific chemical interactions again. When it comes to paracetamol and naproxen, again, you can see here the amount absorbed, which are quite interesting. What we did was, I think I have, a few more minutes. What we did one study which was quite interesting, because we have studied the influence of the temperature, and we we concluded that this is the amount absorbed milligrams per gram of carbon. Sorry, this is in Portuguese. And if you pass from 37 Celsius degrees to 43, please, sorry, you can see that the temperature does not influence that much the absorption capacity of the materials, which is quite interesting, because if someone has a fever, that fever does not impact the absorption of the drugs by the activated carbons. But when we have studied the alcohol consumption, you can see here that when alcohol is around in the system, you can see here that these colonies without alcohol, 20% of alcohol, 50 and 75% of alcohol in the system. So we can see that there is a huge decrease of the absorption capacity of our carbons towards the drugs. So meaning that if someone takes the drugs with alcohol, and it's a huge amount of alcohol. You can see here it's a huge amount of alcohol. But if someone takes the drug with a huge amount of alcohol, let's say a bottle of vodka or a bottle of whiskey, the absorption capacity of not only our materials but carbon mix as well has a significant decrease, which it's a problem because it includes having higher risk of toxic effects. We did a quite simple assessment. Let's say that one person takes a full box of Prozac, let's say fluoxetine. If a person takes a full box of Prozac and our stomach has more or less a 1 liter, sorry, it has 1 liter of content. So the drug concentration would be this one. Usually when someone gets into the hospital settings with an overdose, they treat the person with activated carbons, and usually they use 60 grams of carbon mix, slurry of carbon mix to treat it. So using these premises, meaning a box of Prozac, 1 liter of stomach content, and then 60 grams of the carbons, our materials, the activated carbon that we have produced, can absorb more than 1 gram of fluoxetine under these conditions, which means that basically, if needed, our carbons can be used to treat an overdose of fluoxetine, and the same estimations can be done to the other pharmaceuticals that we have studied. I want to finish up by I did not include in my slides from where I've taken the information, but this is the paper that we have published in the past, and that was the sources of the data that I have shown you. And to finish up, and I think it's always very nice to see faces attached to the names. This is myself, of course. This is a very recent taken picture because with a mask. And Inés, Carlos, a former PhD student, a former master student, and 2 colleagues from Spain, Beatriz and Silvia. Okay, and many thanks for your, let me, okay, stop sharing. I think I.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor, for your wonderful presentation just now. Yeah, I'm impressed about your few slides. One of the slide is about the SEM scanning electron micro picture, sir. Can you open again, sir? Is possible?
Yeah, sure. Yes, me. Sure. Yep. Let me. Okay. You want to see this? Yeah, this one.
Yeah, exactly. So my question is about the 840, 850, and 733. What are the so different the porosities happen with this kind 3 of your things, your research?
Yeah, because the difference is the question is that these are not micropores. Okay, this is how the structure opens up to the exterior, and the difference between, for instance, this is vine shot, coffee endocarp, and sunflower. The difference is because the precursor is different as well. Okay, the structure of the biomass itself is totally different. So when we carbonize and activate the biomass, we end up with the totally different physical structures. But this is very big. Okay, so this is not a pore itself. You can see here it's 40 micra here from here to here. So in a way, the micropores are inside the structure. Okay.
Thank you, Prof, for the explanation. So now open to the our audience. Do you have any questions or any discussion with Prof. Prof. Joe? Prof, I have another one. About the project 20 that you mentioned. Is some issues during the COVID-19 pandemic, is it? So
Yes.
Can you share about that? Can I elaborate about that?
Well, the pandemic has had different impacts in our society. Economical impacts, because with the lockdown, a lot of businesses were closed down. Portugal is a country that lives pretty much in many places. In my city is a very touristic city. So not having tourists in our city, it has a problem. It is a problem. And people are in lockdown. When people are locked down, they are trying to get more depressive. And also people are losing jobs, and losing job is something that is depressive. So people are consuming more this type of drugs, this type of pharmaceuticals, because they are more depressed, and they consume more. And this is a problem. The mental health angle of the pandemic is a problem that we are facing now, and this is a problem that we are going to face in the near future, because we don't really know what really are the impacts of the pandemic and the lockdown into the mental health of people. For instance, teenagers, adolescents that are no longer able to go to schools. They are having online classes. This is we are facing now. We are seeing a lot of problems in the teenagers. For instance, in the university, the kids that have entered the university last year, they had 1 month, I think, in the university. The rest of the time they are at home. When you go to university, being in university is not only studying, not only learning the subject. It's also to mingle. It's also to get new friends. So it has a lot. It's a huge impact of the pandemic, at least in Portugal.
Yes, there's no more culture, university culture.
Yeah, and they miss it. They are fully in the first year.
Perfect, sir. Thank you so much for your brief explanations. So I'd like to pass back to our MC, Shupri. We can proceed for another. Actually, Dr. Alexander, we have some technical issues. So we go back to the Professor Alexander again. And Prof. Samo, thank you so much, sir, for your time. And then don't forget, we have a closing session tomorrow around same time. Thank you, sir. Yes, Shupri, please.
Thank you very much. I'm very sorry for these technical issues. I guess I was cut off in the middle of my lecture and I didn't even notice until I finished, and then I wondered why nobody was listening. So I'm sorry about this. Never happened before in this year and a half of Zooms and the Webex and everything else. So I will just briefly share my screen, and I will go fast through these introductory slides, which are already covered. So I would like to tell you the story. Oh, I'm sorry, what is happening now here? Okay, never mind.
Never mind, sir. Take your time, take your time, no problem.
Something happened with the PowerPoint. Okay, so anyway, I'm talking about the road from liquid crystals to nanoelectronics, why this is important. You don't see my screen now, so I have to share again. And now it will work perfectly. So anyway, if I drop out, just let me know that something is wrong. So I'm going to make this a big screen. So on this road to nanoelectronics, my collaborators, Professor Samo Kralj, Emil Hajn, Uroš Sveber, and graduate student Svati Vasudeva and the Slovenia Research Agency, we are talking about the response to the Moore law, the need for quantum computers, then the use of liquid crystals, where we are particularly interested in nematic and smectic phases, and of course the useful aspects like electric and magnetic field, defects, surface effects, confinement, like for example in CPG glasses, as you observe from this scan electron microscopy image here on this image. And then about in nanoelectronics, we are talking about single molecule electronics, which can overcome the physical barriers to the Moore law. And solid state electronics, quantum liquid crystals are a wonderful idea to the materials like graphene. And we are talking about edge electronics, as observed from this image, where golden nanoparticles are attached, golden atoms actually are attached on the edge of the graphene sheet. So this image was made by one of our graduate students, Swati Vasudevan, who also performed the experiment. And regarding quantum liquid crystal, that's a very interesting idea, which actually shows that you can have liquid crystalline phases also in subatomic, like spin orbit coupling in electrons. Very promising. In 2D materials, I believe I listed this already. And then I show these electronic properties of graphene. So graphene, as you know, is a two-dimensional sheet of carbon atoms in this hexagonal lattice. And the interesting electronic properties are observed here, like between the sites A and B. And I can show this as energy as function of wave vector. And you can see what is happening is that this Fermi levels actually depend on the doping, which means you can dope graphene and you get different nanostructures, for example, nano islands, nanowalls, branch nanostructures, nanoribbons, then there are so-called nano plates, nanodiscs, nanosheets, and nanoflowers. So let me show just an image of this. As you can see, this A is nano island because they look like an island. Nano wall is here on B. That means they grow from the substrate up. Then we have these branch nanostructures on the image C. D is then the so-called nanoribbons. So these are like structures that kind of interconnect different structures. And we have nanoplates, like structures like this. Then you have nanodiscs. Let's see, nanodiscs are this one in F, and nanosheets are G, and the artistic one, the nanoflowers, are this in the image H. So this is all like nanometer scale. If we add graphene to liquid crystals, there is a very promising idea developed by Narayan and co-authored graphene oxide liquid crystals, and with possible applications in energy storage, in optoelectronics, and in different types of fibers. And if we move back to this nanoribbons, two-dimensional carbon structures, here you can see like two possible structures, armchair structure or zigzag structures, which affect the energy levels. So if you look at the graphene nanoribbons, for example, here you have the structures and what happens with this edge scattering mechanism. Another interesting property are these electric properties, which means that if you shape these graphene nanoribbons, you can get, for example, a suppressed transport gap here on the left-hand image, which is, of course, very useful for electronic properties. So that means you shape the dots and the necks in such a way that you can get suppressed transport gap. And you can see here as a function, as a characteristic current as a function of voltage. So if we go on, lattice atom replacement is a very interesting strategy. That means you can, for example, replace carbons with nitrogen or with boron or with both. And here you can see on top right hand what happens with the energy levels in such a case, depending on doping concentration. Then what is another interesting effect that could be used for nanoelectronics, so-called substrate-induced band gap opening in graphene. So here you can see what happens with the energy levels. So this is energy minus Fermi energy, and then what happens with the wave vector. Then we are talking about so-called plasma-assisted tailoring, which means that what is being used is low-energy plasma, some carrier gas, which has golden nanoparticles. So our student, our doctoral student, Aswati Vasudevan, is actually doing these experiments. She also prepared all these beautiful images. And what happens is that these golden nanoparticles, then the gold atoms attach to the edge of the graphene sheet. So on the right-hand side, you can see here the graphene sheet. The gold atoms are attached to it, and this attachment of these gold atoms actually modifies the spin properties, the spins of electrons, which then causes the electric current to go in one way around this. You would call this small piece of graphene, so kind of a nanosheet of graphene. And that's, of course, a very promising application for electronic devices because they have current flowing only in one direction. And that's how you can actually modify the properties necessary for electronic devices. So in conclusion, what I wanted to show you is that liquid crystals provide opportunities for nanoelectronics, in particular for edge electronics. Then we have the so-called quantum liquid crystals, which are very promising also in the field of quantum computing and other optoelectronic devices, which can be made smaller. Graphene is a very promising material, both in connection to liquid crystals and also standalone, like in connection with the gold particles that our student is doing. And also here, when you're attaching atoms to the graphene, plasma techniques are very important because they enhance nanomaterial conductivity and their electrical properties. And the final conclusion is that this miniaturization, which comes from new liquid crystal and graphene and other type of materials, new type of electronics, nanoelectronics, edge electronics, is going to lead to high performance two-dimensional electronic devices, which will significantly reduce energy consumption on one hand and significantly improve the performance which is needed in order that we follow the Moore law. But it's not about the Moore law, it's about the future, the advances of civilization and the quality of life which arises from the ever-advancing nano-electronic technologies, which we hope that will continue for the next 10 and 20 years. So what I have shown you here is more or less basic research, and some parts of this we hope that can be used in the new nanoelectronic devices that will benefit the humanity in the next decade or two. And I thank you very much for your attention. I thank the organizers, particularly Professor Pal, for this kind of invitation, and my co-workers, particularly Professor Samo Kral, Professor Goimir Lachainer, Professor Uros Tverber, and our doctoral student Aswati Vasudevan. Thank you very much, and the questions are, of course, very, very welcome. And I'm glad that we made it all the way to the end without being thrown out. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, Professor Alexander, for your. I think so. Very fast, you finish your presentation, sir.
Yes, I wanted to make up the time which was lost before, so.
No issue, actually no issue.
I didn't want to repeat what I already said before.
No problem. And then, be open for discussion and Q&A with Prof. Alexander about his research on graphene. It's quite interesting about this topic. Actually, myself also, I'm going to do a project in the material for the graphite. So it's a wonderful, sir. I can learn a lot from this presentation. Excellent from you. So I'm now open for the Q&A or any discussion with Prof. Alexander. Anyone is there?
Either everything was clear or I was too fast for the second time, so and they already forgot what I said the first time.
Yeah. So, but I have just one. I just want to learn from you. Actually, is it any possible that we can replace in your project, in your research, graphite with gold, platinum, and aluminum? Is it possible? Is it work with this material?
In principle, however, I mean, here graphene was actually selected because it's the easiest, like two-dimensional material to work with, which means that the bulk of the material, the surface is actually made of graphene. And then also, as you build, like if you build like nanowalls, then you are using carbon atoms to build the nanowalls from. And then this additional material that you add. So gold was actually selected because of interesting properties. And also, yeah, gold should be expensive, but those there are only a few atoms of gold needed, so it's not that expensive. And the most important part is also that these plasma devices that we have in the laboratory of Professor Weber actually allow for this deposition of individual gold atoms on this surface, which can actually then modify the properties, and that can further be used in electronic devices. So it won't be used tomorrow, maybe in 10 years. If it's used in 10 years, then we'll be very happy about it.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir, for your.
You're most welcome, and thank you for your understanding.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So, so any other questions? And Prof, thank you so much for support us. Join this conference and share about your knowledge, share about your research. It's really appreciated, sir.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Hamdan, anything you want to share?
Thank you, Mr. Tina.
Yes.
My name is Hamdan, head of Polymer Department here at Iscnmb Sepang, Malaysia. First of all, very thanks to all presenters, to all doctor, professor for your beautiful lecture, sharing knowledge with us, and we are really appreciate it. Thank you very much, and also for joining us to make it this webinar till day 3. We have been here for 3 days. Very nice, and very thank you very much. And also for the crew, Justina and the rest, they have been working hard to make it this webinar. Thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Hamdan. Mr. Hamdan is our advisor for this conference, and at the same time, he's a head of department polymer technology in Iscnmb Sepang. So thank you so much, sir. So, and then one more thing, we have a closing session tomorrow, Malaysia, around 2:45, sir. We will start, and we have one more session, executive plenary talk from Professor Michael Bellachani from France. He will talk about his research, and then after that session, we have the closing and panel discussion. So we would like to invite all our professor to join and support the panel discussion, and then we can working together in future also, sir. Thank you so much. Yes, Prof. Joe, anything you want to share, sir?
Thank you, and look forward to talking to you tomorrow.
Yes. Okay, so then Shukri, I pass back to you. We can end our session. Then we will catch back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock Malaysian time. Thank you.
All right, sir. Thank you, Dr. Alexander Zinansek. And I also would like to thank you, Professor Yao Manuel Valente Nabais, for the informative and interesting presentation. And I would like to also thank both Mr. Tinakaran and Dr. Marjan Krasna for chairing both of this session. We would like to end our session for today. Any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us via email or WhatsApp group. All right, that's all for today. See you all tomorrow for closing ceremony and award giving session tomorrow. Thank you, Sayonara from Abdullah Shukri. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.